Hey everyone, if you're tuning in from Deer Park, LaPorte, or Pasadena, you probably care about what's happening right here in your own backyard, making this community even better,
That's right.
And this week, one of our listeners actually sent in this TEDx talk. It's by Jason Roberts, and he tells the story of how he helped transform his neighborhood, Oak Cliff, in Dallas.
Yeah, Jason's story is a powerful one. It really shows that change doesn't always have to come from the top down.
Yeah.
He starts by talking about a trip he took to Europe that really shifted his perspective on things.
Oh, interesting.
He saw these amazing public spaces, like vibrant plazas in Italy, those lively streets you see in Scandinavia where people are just out and about enjoying themselves, a lot of them on bikes.
Yeah, yeah.
And it really made an impression on him.
And he comes back home to Oak Cliff.
Exactly. And he feels this kind of let down,
Oh?
He looks at the infrastructure, the roads, the public spaces, and he just feels like something's missing. He even makes this analogy to an aqueduct.
An aqueduct.
Yeah,
right.
it's functional, right?
Yeah.
Gets the water where it needs to go.
Right.
But it's not exactly a place that draws people in. It's not a place where you'd want to hang out or connect with your neighbors.
Right, yeah.
It lacks that human element that he saw so strongly in Europe.
Yeah. I get that. Okay, so today we're going to dive into Jason's story, right?
Exactly.
Kind of taking inspiration from his experiences.
Yeah, we want to unpack what he actually did and the practical steps.
Yeah.
Pull out those nuggets of wisdom that, our listeners right here in Deer Park, LaPorte, or Pasadena can actually use.
Right.
To make a real difference in their communities.
Okay, so Jason, where did he even start?
Well, he starts like a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm.
He decides to get involved by showing up at local organizations.
Okay.
Chamber of Commerce, Lions Clubs, that sort of thing.
The usual suspects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that at first he kind of felt like an outsider in these groups.
Didn't quite fit in.
Yeah, he wasn't sure he belonged. But then he has this realization, a really important one, that shifts his whole thinking.
What was that?
He realized that these were the people who were actually getting things done.
Oh.
These were the doers, the ones making a positive impact. And he realized that it's so important not to dismiss these existing groups, even if you don't immediately feel like you're one of them.
Right.
They often have a wealth of knowledge and connections, and they might just be looking for new energy and ideas.
So he's putting himself out there.
Exactly.
Meeting people, and then what?
Well, then he decides to focus on something specific, a place that really needed help.
Okay.
The Texas Theater on Jefferson Boulevard.
Okay. The Texas Theater.
This wasn't just any old abandoned building, though.
Right.
This place had history, kind of somber history. It was boarded up, dusty, really run down. And it was infamous, really, because it was the place where Lee Harvey Oswald was apprehended after the assassination of President Kennedy.
Wow.
Not exactly a spot that was radiating community vibrancy.
No, definitely not a place you would associate with like fun and activity and stuff. But Jason saw something different, right?
Yeah, he did. He gathered some friends.
Okay.
Artists, musicians, that kind of crowd.
Yeah.
And they decided to put on a one-night art show inside this neglected space.
Inside the theater.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they really had no idea if anyone would even show up.
It was a gamble. So why? Why choose that location?
That's a good question. I think there's something powerful about choosing a place that's clearly underutilized or maybe even has like negative connotations attached to it.
Oh, interesting.
It offers a more dramatic opportunity for transformation.
Right.
And if it works, it can be so impactful in changing people's perceptions. It shows that even the most overlooked places in a community can have potential.
And how did it go?
Way better than they expected.
Yeah.
They were hoping for maybe 100 people, mostly friends. But when they opened the doors that night, 700 people showed up.
Wow.
700 people. At a one-night art show.
Yeah.
In a boarded-up theater.
Yeah.
In a part of town that wasn't exactly known for its thriving art scene.
Wow.
It just blew away their expectations.
Yeah.
And it showed this like real hunger in the community for something new, something engaging.
Yeah. That's a big takeaway right there.
Absolutely.
A small initiative, focused initiative, completely changes how people see that space and maybe even the whole area.
It became a focal point.
Yeah.
Suddenly people were talking about it. They were saying, we love this place. Why hasn't anyone done this before?
Wow. And what about the Texas Theater today?
Look at it now.
Yeah.
It's a thriving venue showing films regularly. It went from this forgotten relic to a real community asset.
Yeah. So if you're listening in Deer Park, LaPorte, Pasadena. Think about the places in your community that are underused or unloved.
Exactly.
What small creative thing, event, or project could you do?
Yeah,
That would spark interest and get people to see them in a new way.
absolutely.
So the success with the Texas Theater gave Jason a lot of momentum.
It did.
He started looking at maps of his neighborhood
Okay.
and noticed a lot of these, older, underused buildings were along this old streetcar line. And that's where he got the idea to bring back the streetcar.
That's right.
But when he, kind of floated this idea to some local developers, business owners,
Right.
they weren't too keen on it, were they?
Not really. They thought it was a pipe dream.
Yeah.
It's something that had been talked about before and dismissed as just not practical.
Right.
But Jason, after seeing what happened with the theater, this improbable idea coming to life, he wasn't discouraged.
He's on a roll.
Yeah. He went home that night, and all on his own, he created a website called the Oak Cliff Transit Authority.
Wow. Just one person.
Yeah, just him.
Making a whole online presence for something that's still just an idea in his head.
Yeah, but it had maps, news sections, the whole works.
Wow. And what happened?
It took off almost immediately. The local newspaper even ran a story about it, something like, "Dreaming of the day the streetcars return."
Wow.
And even though it was just Jason at that point, it gave people in Oak Cliff this, exciting vision for the future.
Right.
People in Oak Cliff were used to hearing negative things about their neighborhood.
Yeah.
But this website, it gave them hope. It showed them that things could be different.
And other people started getting involved.
Oh, yeah. Suddenly he had engineers reaching out, streetcar enthusiasts, all kinds of people. It went from this one guy's website to an actual movement. They formed a board, became a nonprofit.
So just giving an idea a name can really attract others, build momentum, even if it's still early stages.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just about the streetcar.
Oh.
Jason, he was also inspired by seeing so many people biking in other cities.
Okay.
He wanted to encourage more biking in Oak Cliff. But he noticed that at the time, cycling there was very much a niche thing.
Right.
For serious enthusiasts, guys in spandex.
Yeah.
He wanted to make it more mainstream.
Okay.
He talked about wanting to see, pretty girls in dresses on bikes, guys in suits riding comfortably, more upright style bikes, not those racing bikes.
Okay, yeah.
So they formed a group called Bike Friendly Oak Cliff.
Bike Friendly Oak Cliff.
And the funny thing is, Jason didn't even own a bike when they started.
He didn't. That's funny.
I know, right?
Okay, so what does that tell us about leadership?
It tells us that passion and vision can sometimes be more important than expertise. Jason had a clear idea of what he wanted for his community.
Right.
And that enthusiasm was contagious. People were drawn to his vision, even if he wasn't the most experienced cyclist himself.
Right. Okay, so they formed this group. What did they do?
Well, for their first event, they decided to do a bike tour with a bit of an unusual theme.
What was it?
Let's follow the trail of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh, wow.
They thought maybe 20 or 30 people would show up.
Right.
But guess what?
What?
150 people showed up.
For a bike tour.
Yeah, for this bike tour, following the path of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Wow. That's amazing.
It was. And Jason, who was suddenly leading this large group of people, realized something important about community engagement.
What's that?
He realized that genuine enthusiasm is contagious, and it's off of the foundation of good leadership.
Yeah.
If you're really passionate about something, you can share that vision with others, people will want to join you.
Yeah.
You don't need to have all the answers or even be an expert yourself to get things started.
That's a good point.
And bike-friendly Oak Cliff, it didn't just stay local.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it inspired similar groups to pop up in other cities, even internationally. And they now have a big annual bicycle festival. All from this one simple idea.
Yeah.
And giving it a clear identity.
Right.
It's kind of like how the Bishop Arts District in Oak Cliff became a recognized destination. Someone just started calling that area by that name, and it stuck. It completely changed the image and the appeal of that area.
Just giving it a name.
Yeah.
Interesting. So for our listeners in Deer Park, LaPorte, Pasadena, think about the initiatives in your area that could get more attention.
Right.
Just by having a strong, memorable name.
Absolutely. It really makes a difference. People remember it. They identify with it.
So we've got the theater, we've got the transit authority idea, we've got the bike movement.
Yeah.
What did Jason tackle next?
Well, next, he turned his attention to this really neglected block in Oak Cliff.
Okay.
It was a place that had once been a streetcar stop, but it just wasn't thriving.
Why not?
He started digging into it.
Okay.
And what he found was a whole bunch of outdated local ordinances.
Oh, like red tape, bureaucracy?
Yeah, basically. This block had been converted into a one-way street. The sidewalks were super narrow.
Mm.
And there were all these zoning regulations that had just piled up over the years.
Okay.
Things like you need a really expensive permit to put out flowers.
Really?
Or to have a couple of cafe tables on the sidewalk.
Wow.
And restrictions on gatherings, limitations on awnings, displaying merchandise, all those little things that make a street lively.
Right.
All these things that make a street a place where people want to be
Yeah.
were basically prohibited.
So what did they do?
Well, Jason and his team, they came up with a pretty radical idea.
Okay.
They thought, okay, if the rules are preventing us from creating a better block, what if we just ignore them
Just break the rules.
temporarily,
Yeah.
just for a weekend?
Okay. Like a statement.
Yeah, like a deliberate act of, I guess you could call it civil disobedience,
Right, right.
just to demonstrate what was possible.
And how did they do that?
Well, they did all sorts of things. They painted their own temporary bike lanes.
Okay.
They brought in cafe tables and chairs without permits, installed some vintage-style lighting just temporarily, added planters with flowers. They even put up signs listing the specific rules they were breaking.
They were, like, calling attention to it.
Yeah,
That's pretty bold.
it was.
And did anyone stop them?
Well, they invited city staff and local officials to come and experience this Better Block event.
Better block. Okay.
And you know what?
What?
The response was overwhelmingly positive.
Really?
Yeah,
Hmm.
people could actually see the potential of the street when you lifted these restrictions, even though it was technically against the rules.
So they got away with it.
Well, more than that, the city actually started to take a look at those old regulations,
Okay.
and they began revising them.
Wow.
So it really showed that sometimes those rules and restrictions that we have, they're just leftovers from the past.
Right.
They might not make sense anymore.
Yeah.
And it's worth questioning them.
In our own town.
Exactly. In Deer Park, LaPorte, Pasadena,
Right.
wherever you are, take a look at the rules that are in place. Maybe they need to be updated.
So this Better Block experiment, it wasn't just about breaking the rules. It was about showing what could be.
Exactly. And it led to something else really interesting. They started creating temporary businesses in the empty storefronts along the block.
Oh, like pop-up shops.
Yeah, exactly. They set up a pop-up coffee shop, a temporary art studio for kids, even a little flower market,
Yeah.
all just for the weekend.
Cool.
It was a low-risk way for people to test out business ideas and for the community to experience new amenities.
Right.
And one of those pop-ups actually became a permanent business,
Which one?
the kids' art studio. The community loved it so much that it stayed.
Wow.
And now it offers ongoing classes. It's become another anchor for the neighborhood.
So showing what's possible, lowering the barriers to entry.
Exactly. Sometimes you just need to give people a taste of something great, and they'll want to make it permanent.
The Better Block concept was so successful that they decided to do it again.
They did. They picked another neglected streetcar stop. But this time, they had a new challenge.
What was that?
The Dallas summer heat.
Oh, yeah.
It was brutal, like 103 degrees.
That's hot.
Yeah. But they didn't let that stop them. They brought in 42 trees.
That's 42 trees.
Yeah, and 100 bushes to create these temporary pedestrian islands. They built decks out of pallets, set up more temporary shops. They were determined to turn this hot, barren space into something more inviting.
Wow.
And you know what?
But
People didn't want to leave.
even in that heat.
Even in that heat, they'd created a place that people actually enjoyed being in.
Wow. So how did they get 42 trees?
Well, there's a great story about that. The trees were actually meant for a hotel.
Okay.
But Jason and his group convinced the hotel to let them use the trees for the weekend.
For their project.
Yeah, just to make the space more beautiful.
Yeah.
And it worked. It was amazing to see these trees arrive.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Jason talks about something called rendering fatigue.
Rendering fatigue.
Yeah, we see these fancy architectural drawings of what things could be like.
Right.
But the Better Block project was all about real, tangible change.
Right here, right now.
Exactly. He tells a story about a young boy who saw a tree on the block
Okay.
and asked what it was.
Really?
Yeah, like he had never seen a tree up close before. It just shows how disconnected people had become from nature in that environment.
Wow. That's sad.
Yeah, it is.
So they took this quick action, let's make it happen approach and applied it to other things.
Oh, yeah. There was this group that had been trying to get a dog park built for over a year.
Okay.
They were facing all sorts of bureaucratic obstacles.
Right, red tape.
Exactly. And the local council member told them that the city needed this massive multi-million-dollar space for a dog park, far away from where people actually lived.
So not practical.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So they went to Jason, and they were standing in this vacant lot that was basically being used as a dumping ground.
Oh.
And Jason just said, why don't we make this into a dog park?
Right there.
Yeah, not months or years, but next weekend.
Wow.
So they found all these fallen trees from a recent storm,
Okay.
and they used them for mulch. They made their own park sign, got some temporary fencing,
Okay.
and they built a temporary dog park. Called it Popa Pooch Park.
Papa Pooch Park. I love it.
All in one weekend.
So they just went for it. And
And it worked.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
People loved having a local dog park, even if it was temporary. And it showed the city council that there was a real need and real enthusiasm for it.
Right.
So they actually ended up approving a permanent dog park in the area.
Wow. So sometimes actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely. Don't just talk about it, do it.
So they revitalized these neglected blocks, fostered these pop-up businesses, got a dog park built. What was next?
Well, then Jason set his sights on what he called the most soul-crushing, cold, gray, horrible place he could find in Dallas.
What was that?
City Hall Plaza.
City Hall Plaza.
Yeah.
What was wrong with it?
Well, it was designed by I.M. Pei.
Famous architect.
Yeah. It was this huge space right in front of City Hall, thousands of employees.
Okay.
But it was almost always empty. Just this vast, sterile expanse of concrete.
Not very inviting.
Not at all. And Jason, he found this old plan from decades ago by a sociologist named William White. It was all about activating the plaza,
Okay.
making it a more welcoming public space. But at the time, they thought it was too expensive and wouldn't work.
So what did they do?
Jason and his team decided to implement parts of this plan themselves,
Okay.
using low-cost DIY methods. They built pergolas and benches out of reclaimed pallet wood. It took them about 30 days,
Wow.
but they transformed the space.
So what happened?
Well, suddenly you had city council members playing Frisbee on the plaza.
No way.
Giant chess sets appeared. They even launched something called the Living Plaza, where they brought in local food vendors in a repurposed shipping container. It completely changed the atmosphere for city employees,
Yeah.
and it actually drew more people to the area.
Wow. Amazing what a little bit of creativity and effort can do.
It really is. And they even repurposed those cold concrete benches into game tables.
Smart. So all these amazing things happening in Oak Cliff, did they stay local?
Nope. The Better Block concept spread across the U.S.
Really?
and even internationally. Jason started consulting with other communities,
Okay.
and they made the idea open source. They wanted everyone to try it in their own neighborhoods. Even Billy Joel got involved with the Better Block project in New York City.
Billy Joel. Wow.
Yeah, it really shows how far-reaching the idea became.
And what about the streetcar?
Oh, the streetcar. That's the most inspiring part of the story.
Okay.
Remember, it started with just a website,
Yeah.
but years of advocacy, of believing in this idea, it paid off.
They actually got the streetcar back.
They did. They secured a $23 million grant,
Yeah.
and the streetcar is now back in Oak Cliff.
Wow. That's incredible.
It is. It shows what can happen when you have a vision, a dedicated group of people, and you don't give up.
So what are the takeaways for our listeners in Deer Park, LaPorte, Pasadena? What can we learn from Jason's story?
Well, he boils it down to three main things.
Okay.
First, show up.
Show up.
Be present in your community. Even if it seems like it's always the same small group of people, your presence matters.
Right.
Second, give it a name.
Give it a name.
Whether it's a project, a space, an idea, give it a name.
Okay.
It creates a sense of identity.
Right.
And third, set a date and publish it.
Set a date and publish it.
Jason calls it blackmail, but it's really about the power of deadlines.
Right.
And making your intentions public.
It holds you accountable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have all the details figured out, setting a date forces you to take action.
Don't overthink it.
Exactly.
Just do it.
So for our listeners, in Deer Park, LaPorte, Pasadena, the power to create positive change is in your hands.
It really is. It starts with your passion, your willingness to take that first step.
Remember those three things. Show up, give it a name, and set a date.
Think about one small action you can take in your neighborhood based on these ideas.
And remember, that's what Think and Act Locally is all about.
Right.
Empowering residents here in Deer Park, LaPorte, and Pasadena to make our community better. If you appreciate what we do and you want to support us in providing more local information and inspiration, please consider donating. You can find the link in our show notes at thinkandactglobally.com/donate.
And as you go about your week, I want you to think about those little things that bug you or the places in your community that just seem forgotten.
Yeah.
What if, inspired by Jason Roberts and the people of Oak Cliff, you decided this weekend to just try something different?
What if you did?
Think about it.
Yeah, think about it.
See you next time.
See you next time.